All right. Good morning, everyone. Welcome to a new week. Is this week 7? Is that what it is?
It was week 6 last week.
It was week 6 last weekend. So yeah, it's already week 7. Oh boy, it goes quick, doesn't it? Does it go quick? Yeah, it does go quick. Yeah, in some ways I like our short terms, but in some ways they just seem to fly by so fast that it feels like we barely have time to do anything, and then we're done. But we're only halfway, so we shouldn't panic yet. Good weekend? Good weekend? Okay? Normal? Anything fun? Anything fun happen?
No homework.
You had no homework? Or you did no homework?
No homework.
You're not going to elaborate?
No.
Okay. You didn't have any?
Yeah.
Oh. That's good. You deserve a couple days to relax, be a little lazy. Amanpreet, anything fun?
I have a math test on Tuesdays.
Ooh, Mr. Will, Mr. Keith,
Mr.
Mr. Keith. It's okay. I'm sure it'll be fine. Okay, let's hop back in. Good morning. Let's hop back in here. So, on Friday we were talking about sexism in advertising, and maybe one of the things I should have mentioned when we started sexism, actually maybe I did mention it, but I'm kind of folding in heterosexism to it as well. Okay, so we're talking about men as the dominant group, but we're also talking about straight people as the dominant group as well. And again, gender, I think at the very beginning I tried to convince you that gender and sexuality are not the same thing, and they're not necessarily, connected in the obvious way that we think they are. But again, I don't have a full unit for heterosexism, so I'm just kind of slipping it in here where it makes sense. So yeah, not the same thing, but I'm just talking about it in this unit. What we talked about on Friday was the idea that advertising is very powerful, right? It is a billion-dollar industry, a multi-billion-dollar industry that tries to sort of hijack our psychology, right? It tries to make us do something that maybe we wouldn't ordinarily want to do, right? I want to stick to my diet because I want to be healthy and trim and fit into all my clothes, but then on comes that Pizza Hut commercial, right? And I'm very tempted to go online and order myself a pizza, right? And again, advertisers are very good at convincing us of what we should. Sorry, that's just distracting. Marketers, advertisers are very good at convincing us to do the thing they want us to do, right? And they spend a lot of money, they do a lot of research, they have degrees in psychology and human behavior. They know how to get us to do things. And one of the things that is kind of an end result of this is that advertising often perpetuates stereotypes, right? Because many things that we watch, if you watch a commercial on regular cable television, which I know all of you are too young to do, but just imagine people doing it 100 years ago, or a commercial on YouTube, because those come up. Those are probably things that we watch more. That advertiser's got, what do they have? 20 seconds? 20 seconds to sell you? If that? That's not a lot of time, right? They've got to create a scenario, they've got to position their product in that scenario, and then they've got to make their product look good somehow, right? They don't have a lot of time, and so because of that, they often, again, use stereotypes as a shortcut, right? And so we often see that we see that products are heavily gendered, right? So here we have some very typical boy toys. Here we have some very typical girl toys. And the messages that these toys transmit is totally different, right? The boys' toys seem to transmit ideas of violence, right? But also ideas of control, right? Of control of yourself or control of other people. They transmit messages of agency. I use that fancy, if you want to sound smart, use that word appropriately, agency. These toys transmit agency. These kids can go out into the world and do stuff, right? They have cars and backhoes and guns and talking trees, things like that. They have these things. They can go out and make a difference. They can go out and change the world with the tools in front of them, right? But girls don't really get the same message, right? Girls are getting the message that, you know, their looks are important, that, you know, fashion is important, that taking care of babies is important, and maybe even that being slim is important. If you've ever seen a Barbie doll, you know she is very, very slim, to the point where, you know, if you expanded her, you know, the doll's measurements to real life measurements, no human woman is built this way, right? No human woman has the kind of measurements that Barbie has. So again, you've got these, you know, sort of very different messages, and, you know, whether they're damaging or not is another question, but we're definitely giving different messages to our little boys and to our little girls as they grow up in society, right? We said that foods are often heavily marketed as well, and even though, yes, any gendered person can eat or drink these foods, similarly to these, of course, but we often see these marketed and associated with one gender or another, right? Salads and healthy yogurt and fruity appletini, those are usually associated with women, with feminine things, right? Chocolate cake, because, you know, when women get depressed, they want chocolate, right? That's the stereotype that's out there. That's a stereotype that's out there. Maybe it's not your...
No, but I have a question.
Sure.
Like, they say that women want to be slim,
Mhm.
and chocolate keeps them fat, so how do they match?
Oh, irony, right? Yeah, so there's a focus on women's attractiveness and women being slim, but also there's this association that, you know, chocolate and maybe ice cream are women's foods, right? Particularly when women get broken up with, there's the stereotype of the woman, you know, eating a bunch of ice cream, right? So yeah, those things are kind of a little bit contradictory, but and maybe because they're just oversimplifications, and they're so oversimplified that they don't really track in the real world very well, right? So, because again, you know, men eat these foods too. I had salad last night. Didn't quite look like that, but it was a good salad. I had salad last night. I did not have a giant piece of chocolate cake, which I'm not happy about, but yeah, exactly, right? So again, these ideas are oversimplified. Women drink and eat these foods as well, but we market them to one gender or another, right? Based on stereotypes. And so again, if you're going to sell, my head's in the way here. Whoop. If you're going to sell a nice cold beer, then you're going to market that to men, because men usually drink beer, and you're going to use stereotypes that are associated with things that men like, right? So they'll be in a bar with all their buddies shooting pool, or they'll be out at the lake jet skiing, or, you know, maybe they'll be at a cool party, or maybe they'll be checking out this really attractive woman or something like that. The commercial will be, they'll be watching the football game. It'll be something that's very stereotypically a guy activity, right? And again, women drink beer too, but we see it heavily marketed to men. And when it is, it's marketed through stereotype, right? It's marketed through these kind of ideas, because in 20 seconds, they want you to pay attention to the beer, not to the sort of novelty of the situation, right? Same thing, we could go all day with this, but again, even in the shower, when people are cleaning up, there are gendered products, right? And women's products tend to be sort of more flowery smelling. They tend to focus more on hydration and moisturizing. Guys don't seem to be quite as concerned about moisturizing. And again, guys' products are going to be very, what's the word I'm looking for to describe this bottle? Pretty basic, right? Like pretty sort of minimally stylish. Yeah, I'm not sure how to describe it. And yeah, it's, sorry, I just lost my train of thought. Yeah, we see gendered advertising and products in the shower as well. And even when you're doing things that are completely not good for your health, smoking, although you don't see ads like this anymore, thankfully, but you used to see them in magazines all the time. And again, they market directly to men or women, right? And again, the cigarettes probably aren't that different. They're a different shape, they're in a different package. Nicotine is nicotine, and all of the harmful additives that are in there are, bad for you to be inhaling into your lungs, but different messages, right? Here we see the man being rugged, individualistic, independent, cool, right? He's being all these things while he's smoking his Camel cigarette. And this woman here is being something that is kind of more feminine, more fun, more breezy. She's dressed in this nice evening dress. Maybe she's going to a cocktail party or something. She's got all of her diamonds on. And so there's kind of this transmission of like glamour and wealth and slimness, right? This brand is all about being slim. And so even though the products are not that different, cigarettes are basically cigarettes, the marketing is chosen to appeal to what men and women are supposed to like, right? What men and women are supposed to be like. And in doing that, they perpetuate stereotypes, right? We also said that who uses the products is interesting and important as well, right? Because often the dominant group will not borrow from the minoritized group. In doing so, they lose status. The minoritized group will borrow from the dominant group and again will gain status through that. And so we see this a lot with female characters. They will, have kind of elements of manliness in their character, and that will make them seem kind of badass, right? So characters maybe like Marvel's Jessica Jones, where she's wearing a leather jacket and jeans and shooting whiskey, or Janelle Monáe, who she's not doing it now, but a few years ago she was really into tuxedos, which is a male sort of suit, but again, she looked really cool in that suit. Of course it helps that she's a phenomenal singer, writer, producer, dancer, right? That all helps, but she's able to kind of pull that off. The only thing that I don't have an explanation for in this regard is elements of cultural appropriation. I don't know how that works in this explanation, because when people culturally appropriate, usually it's the dominant culture, sort of white people, borrowing things from other cultures where and whenever they want to, and kind of using those things. And so there was a bit of a stir a few years ago about, people don't do it as much anymore because I think they're over sensitive to it. Katy Perry, I think, did either a musical performance or a video where she was dressed up as like a Japanese geisha, and so that she was accused of cultural appropriation. She was accused of kind of wearing Japanese culture like a costume kind of thing. But that was a number of years ago. There was also a scandal a number of years ago about lingerie models, so like Victoria's Secret models, walking down the runway in their lingerie, and one of the designers had chosen to have one of these models wear a Native American or a First Nations headdress, with all the feathers on it. And so they were accused of cultural appropriation there as well. So I'm not really sure how that works, because sometimes the dominant group will borrow things from other cultures and use them, again, as a fashion accessory kind of thing. And I don't know quite how that works. The cultural appropriation thing, I have no idea who this is, but it's a good question, I suppose. Do you know anything about cultural appropriation? Yeah? Do you have any answers for this? Is it good? Is it bad? Is it right? Oh, it's Mulder. Sorry, Mulder. Is it good, bad? Is it right? Is it wrong? Can the dominant culture, which is globally is kind of white North American culture, can it just borrow whatever it wants and do whatever it wants with people's cultural clothing or rituals, or can we just do whatever we want with whatever we want? Or do you have no idea what I'm talking about?
I think it's okay as long as you don't contribute yourself. You don't take from somebody's culture, but then you embrace it from. Because then it's what you're really helping. You know what I mean? If you're appreciating it. I wouldn't say wearing the costume, because that's, it's not that.
Right. Right. Let's, okay, good. Okay. That'll work. Okay. So here's, there we go. So this is what people made a big deal about a number of years ago. And so here's a Victoria's Secret model walking down the runway. Victoria's Secret, very, not expensive, but very popular lingerie manufacturer. And here she is wearing a ceremonial headdress from Native North Americans. So this is a headdress that's made, I believe, mostly of eagle feathers in real life. I don't know if this one is, but the real ones are. And they're only worn by the chief, right? So they're not regular everyday wear. Not everyone gets to wear this particular headdress in Native North American culture. This would be worn by a respected elder leader, right? This is a big deal to wear this. So what's wrong with what's happening here? And the model, the model's just wearing whatever she's told to wear, right? So it's not her fault. But is there something wrong here? Is this offensive? Well, we're talking about cultural appropriations. So the idea of the dominant group, which is kind of white North American culture, whatever that is, has borrowed something from Native North American culture and put it into a new context. So here we have a headdress that is only worn by First Nations chiefs, so high status leaders that people respect. And here it is on the head of a North American lingerie model. So is there something wrong there?
I guess maybe what does he use that it would be offensive for them, because he said whatever something respectable.
To wear that has that has a lot of significance, right? Not everyone gets to wear that.
For her culture, it was respectable because they just needed to get costume.
Yeah, well, I'd kind of phrase it that way. Yeah, that it's kind of the meaning is not there, right? So in First Nations culture, the meaning is, to wear this is like, oh, this is a respected leader of the community. This is an important person.
It's like they use it for entertainment.
Yeah, here it's just used for entertainment, right? Isn't this cool? Isn't this sexy? I'm walking down the runway in my underwear with this thing on my head, right? What else do you think is going on here that sort of complicates the story of this? You might need a bit of historical knowledge, but what else is going on here? Do you know anything about the history of North America and how it was settled and how the United States was created, and Canada? No? Yes? A little bit? We'll get to this a little bit later in the next unit. Actually, we'll get to this. But the short version of this story is that Europeans came to North America. They came to North America after it was discovered by Christopher Columbus, and over several hundred years, they basically destroyed indigenous culture on this continent. And so there were wars that happened, people were enslaved, people were killed, people died of disease, people were pushed out of the way and put onto reservations, and Native North American communities were marginalized. They were pushed to the side, they were pushed out of the way, and so that white Europeans could build the country that they so wanted to build, the US and Canada. And so Native North Americans lost out. Indigenous people lost out in this whole process. Their cultures were destroyed on purpose, and they were almost destroyed on purpose as well. And so how do you think that feels, for an indigenous person to know that Europeans came to North America, destroyed their culture, just about wiped them out entirely, and then you see this, right? So here's this person taking something that is basically a sacred part of your culture and parading it around like it's, again, like it's a costume or like it's some sort of sexy underwear accessory. What does that feel like, do you think?
I mean, because the Native American persons do this, they're just students.
Yes, but the question is, would you be able to get a Native North American to do this? Because as far as I know, there aren't any Native North Americans in Victoria's Secret, although they've become, I think, much more diverse in the last number of years. But what I'm trying to sort of get you to pay attention to here is the power dynamic, okay? Because that's often, that heavily affects what we sort of see and do in terms of social justice issues, or in terms of appropriation, or in terms of racism or sexism or any kind of idea. You have to look at the societal context, right? So maybe this is offensive and maybe isn't, but again, think about this in the context of the history of North America, right? Where this land belonged to indigenous people. They were we would call them First Nations because they were the first people here. This was their home, and they were thrown out of their home so that other people could build this country on top of their home, right? And so that probably doesn't feel very good, I would imagine. And so you have this kind of that context, and then you have this existing within it, right? And so it's important to sort of look at the individual scenario, right? So here's a lingerie model wearing a headdress, okay, but what is the sort of historical situation? What's the context? What is the power dynamic between white Europeans and indigenous people in North America, right? How does this play out? How does this feel? The other question I might ask you in regards to this is, if there's a question of, is this offensive? Is this wrong? Who gets to say? Who gets to decide if it's right or wrong? Okay, the people affected, and those are? Who? Yeah. So indigenous people are the ones who really should get to say whether this is offensive or not, right? If I just look from my sort of white North American perspective, yeah, I don't see anything wrong here, right? It's a lingerie show, it's all in fun, the women like to look at the fashions. I assume it's mostly for guys, but who knows? I don't know what the viewership is for this, for this event. But yeah, from the white North American perspective, yeah, there's nothing offensive here, right? Woohoo, lingerie show. But for indigenous people, it's a different story. And again, they're really the ones who get to make the call, right? If I punch you in the face, which I never would do, if I punch you in the face, who gets to say if it hurts, you or me? Yeah, because you're the one who got punched, right? I don't get to say, no, that didn't hurt. You're fine. That didn't hurt, right? I don't get to say that because I don't really know how it felt. You're the one who gets to say how it feels, right? And so here's kind of the same thing, right? Is that they're the ones who are in the minoritized position. They're the ones who are lacking power, and they're the ones who historically have been punched in the face a lot of times, right? And so, again, who gets to say if this is offensive or not? Indigenous people do, right? And they did. They said very loudly that, hey, we don't appreciate you using our cultural symbols and our cultural dress to sell your lingerie, especially when, by the way, you white North Americans took our country from us and still haven't, we still haven't sorted that out yet. We're still suffering because of that. And now you're going to take our stuff and parade it around the lingerie runway? Come on. And so, again, there's the event, there's the incident here, there's the context, historical and cultural, and then there's kind of who gets to make the call, right? And in this case, indigenous people get to make the call. People like me don't get to say whether this is okay or not. And again, it's not okay, right? That's what First Nations people communicated. It's not okay. And I think that's probably the last time that Victoria's Secret did that too. So they did kind of learn their lesson, but it's a good question, right? Okay, enough looking at her. Let's get rid of this. Right. So again, I don't have an explanation for how that works in the context of this, in terms of minoritized groups borrowing from the dominant group and gaining status from it. Usually it works that the dominant group will not borrow from the minoritized group, but as we just saw, sometimes that happens, right? And I don't have an explanation for that, I'm afraid. But either way, because advertisers have so little time to talk to us, they often deal in stereotypes, in obvious situations. And so you're kind of seeing less and less of this because people are becoming more aware of it. And so advertisers are responding. But what you used to see is in commercials and ads, you used to see certain roles for men and women. So again, if you're selling laundry soap, laundry detergent, what's the commercial about? Mom or dad? Mom. right? She's running around the house with a laundry basket. She's got 3 kids running around. She's like, oh, my life's crazy. I don't have time for stains. That's why I use Tide or whatever, right? That's how they go. And so, again, they don't show you dad doing the laundry because that's not stereotypical. And then you'll get distracted and you'll be like, oh, dad's doing the laundry. That's interesting. What do you think about that? And then you're not paying attention to the soap, right? And they want you to pay attention to the soap. So they give you things that are very stereotypical. And so, yeah, if it's a laundry thing that's being sold, yeah, it's usually mom, right? It's usually the woman. And, you know, dad is not doing the laundry, right? Never mind, you would almost never see dad doing the laundry. And if you did, he certainly wouldn't be a gay man. You wouldn't see a household with 2 dads, because then people would be like, oh my gosh, look at this. There's a gay couple in this ad. I've never seen that before. And then again, you're not paying attention to the soap. So advertisers will give you exactly what you expect to see, stereotypically, so that you don't get distracted, so that you focus on the soap. And again, but when you see those things over and over and over and over again, it normalizes certain things, right? It normalizes the idea that, yeah, women are in charge of the cooking and the cleaning and the shopping, right? Lots and lots of commercials that have to do with those 3 things, with the home, the domestic sphere, always marketed at women, right? Grocery shopping, cleaning, cooking, taking care of the kids, right? Car stuff, barbecues, lawn maintenance, all marketed at men, right? They don't sell lawnmowers to women, right? They just don't. Yeah, so we see certain roles being normalized. We see their likes and dislikes. We see kind of certain ways in which men and women are supposed to be, the sort of roles in the household they're supposed to have. And again, we also normalize heterosexuality, right? You almost never see a gay couple or a gay person in an ad for anything. Almost never, right? And again, I don't know that advertisers have anything against homosexuality, but it's distracting, right? Because people will pay attention to it, not to the product. And so again, we see the same ads, the same commercials over and over again with very stereotypical men and women, heterosexual couple. Everybody's doing their job. Women are doing the housework, men are doing the lawn work and the car maintenance. And again, it normalizes the idea that that's how things are and that's how things should be. We said that messaging appears in movies as well, and in some cases for the same reason, right? Some of the reasons that movies kind of resonate with us is that they show us something that, is unexpected and fun and exciting, but they also show us things that we already know, right? If you watch, I've seen this happen with, or I've experienced this when I've watched foreign films. So films that were made in another country, even if they're French films or from another country, because the culture is different, there's a lot of things that don't land, right? They don't make sense to you. Have you experienced this? Have you watched movies from from another country where you're like, oh, I don't know that it's a little bit of a disconnect, or is this just me? Or am I? It's just me? Maybe I'm just not watching the right foreign films, right? But regardless, movies are going to show us a lot of things that we already know in order to kind of connect with us, but also save time, right? And so, again, we often see very kind of stereotypical background characters, not the main characters usually, although sometimes, but we'll often see these same kind of characters showing up, right? Like the bad boy, the anti-hero, angry black woman, elderly martial arts master, the nerd, the jock, the ugly, scary villain, right? All of these characters will show up over and over and over again with different details, obviously. But again, when we see a stereotypical character, because they're stereotypical, we instantly know who they are, and then the filmmaker doesn't have to spend any more time, right? So again, in Mean Girls, Damien is a perfect example. We meet him, and in under a minute, we know who he is. We know what he's about, and then we don't have to spend any more time with him. And then he's just comic relief for the rest of the movie, right? But he's very stereotypically a gay character, right? But in this movie, there's no depth to him, right? There's no depth to him. And so again, the more we see stereotypical characters, the more often we associate those stereotypes with reality. And it's especially dangerous for minoritized groups, because minoritized groups tend not to be the center of the story, although that is changing. But in North American cinema, at least, usually the main characters are dominant group members, right? White, heterosexual males, usually. Sometimes we see sexist messaging in plots as well. And so, anybody a horror film? I know you like horror films. I know you like to sit home in the dark and watch them, which is terrifying. Anybody else like horror films? Sometimes, a little bit. Horror films can, not all of them, but some of them have very sexist messaging as well. And so, kind of the classic horror slasher film is the murdering of teens, right? So a bunch of teenagers go off, or a bunch of young girls go off to the woods or to a cabin or somewhere, or they get lost, and then they are stalked by a serial killer who kills them one at a time, right? Very, very common plot in horror movies, shows up again and again and again, right? And interestingly, usually what you see is that the order that these women are killed in has a lot to do with cultural ideas about women's behavior, okay? So usually you see that all of the girls in there are young and pretty, right? That's usually who the victims of these slasher films are, young, pretty girls, right? They are killed off in an order that is rather interesting. Do you ever do this? Do you ever watch a movie and like you can guess who's going to get killed next? How do you? Yes. What's that? Stranger Things. Stranger Things probably doesn't follow this particular mold, I don't think. It's kind of a different animal, Stranger Things. Often what you find, or what you found in the past, is that certainly minority characters would be killed off earlier. So if one of the characters was black, they would be killed off earlier. You also see that the girls that are either the dumbest or the kind of, what's the word I'm looking for, most sexually liberated, they would often be killed first as well. And so you kind of get these messages of, you know, the bad girls, or the not attractive girls, or the girls who are not following societal rules, girls who are not pure or who are sexually promiscuous. They're the ones who are going to get killed off first. And the one who makes it through to the end is the good girl, right? The girl who's, you know, trying to escape this horrible situation so she can get back to her family, or maybe to her boyfriend or her husband, right? And so these films are kind of transmitting messages about what's appropriate for women and what's not in society, and the ones who are judged to be breaking the rules get killed off, and they get killed pretty brutally because it's a horror film, right? But it also kind of normalizes a violence against women, and it sexualizes the violence sometimes as well. And that's kind of worthy of thinking about, right? Like, why do we enjoy a film where this deranged man kills a bunch of young women? Why are we interested in watching that? And why is the reverse usually not the case? Why do we not see films in which there's a female serial killer and she kills off a bunch of guys? A bunch of good-looking guys having a nice weekend at the cabin. And then this horrible female serial killer comes around and kills them off one by one. Have you ever seen that movie? I've never seen that movie. But why? Why have we seen this movie like 100 times, and why have we not seen the other movie at all? Is it impossible for a woman to kill a man? Nope. Not impossible. But why doesn't it happen? Let's think about rom-coms, romantic comedies, chick flicks. Anybody like these? Yeah? Got any favorites? You can't choose? I won't hold you to it. I won't hold you to it. Give me like 3 that you like. How to Lose a Guy in 10 Days. The Lake House. Legally Blonde. Parts of it probably are. It's not entirely a love story. It's kind of a bit of a career movie too. But it's got. There's a romantic element to it, yeah. Which is very common, which is interesting for Legally Blonde, because Legally Blonde could have been all about her kind of becoming a lawyer, right? But apparently that story was not complete without the romantic element, without the man. And often you see that message transmitted in romantic comedies, and even a comedy like Legally Blonde, which is not entirely a love story, but in part it is. And so the usual kind of way these movies work is on a fairy tale kind of plot line. And so we usually see a lead character who might be kind of a selfless caretaker, right? Maybe she's looking after her brother or her siblings, or maybe she's looking after her parents or an aging father or something like that. She might be some woman who's very career driven, and I think increasingly we're seeing that type of character in romantic comedies. The woman who's, she's kind of married to her job and she's really busy with whatever her career is. And she's often so involved in her life, whether it's taking care of people or whether it's managing her career, that she doesn't really have time to date, right? She doesn't have time to really get out there, right? And she's usually got friends around her who are saying, you've got to, why don't you get out there and find a guy? The clock's ticking. Why don't don't you want to be happy? Or there's always this message from friends or from parents in the movie that are, encouraging her to put herself out there, right? And she's always like, oh, I'm too busy, or I don't have time for that, or I don't need that, or she always kind of denies it, right? And then she'll meet the guy, right? And of course, we're watching the movie, we know who the guy is, but she never knows it, right? She usually meets the guy, and sometimes she doesn't like him. Sometimes, they have they meet cute, or then he screws it up, or some sort of thing happens, and again, it's, she finds out she doesn't really like him, but he likes her, right? And so what does he do? He pursues her, right? He tries to convince her that in fact he's the guy, right? And this is cool because we the audience know that, right? We know he's the guy. And so we're like, come on, Jennifer Lopez, can't you just see that he's the guy? Can't you just see it? They're perfect together, right? And she doesn't see it. And so again, her friends kind of encourage her to get involved, right? To either pair up with this guy or give him another chance or whatever. And once she finally realizes that, oh, he is the guy, once she realizes that, then everything's fine, right? Then her life is like, oh, now it's perfect. And you can sometimes see it if you pay close attention, that even her fashion gets better, right? So if if they finally get together and then you see them after the wedding, her hair is different and better, her clothes are different and better. Her entire life is made better by this guy. And it's interesting because if you think about the messaging, and it's very satisfying at the end of the film when they get together, right? And you're like, oh, I knew they'd get together, right? It's a nice feeling. But one of the sort of implied messages of a film like this is that her life was not very good without him, right? Even though some of these female characters have great career, they have a great family, they have a dog, they have a very active life, they seem to be enjoying themselves, and in fact, they're not the ones who are saying, something's missing. They're not saying that. Everyone around them is saying, yeah, something's missing. Why don't you put yourself out there? Why don't you get out there and, live life or whatever? There's all these kind of coded messages, right? And then at the end of the film, we find that, oh, her life was incomplete, right? Her life is so much better with the guy. Good morning. The guy. And so, does that seem like kind of a problematic message to you? Because often, and correct me if I'm wrong here, but often when you see movies like this, the guy who's without the girl, he's just fine, right? He's like living it up, riding motorcycles, having a good time, drinking with his buddies. He's usually not missing anything, right? Or at least he doesn't feel that he is. But for women, they are, the message is that they need, the guy is required for happiness. If you want a happy, fulfilled life, you need the guy, right? And so, but there's another message here that's kind of weird, I think, too. And it's the message that, like when she meets the guy and then she doesn't like him very much, right? And then he kind of keeps pursuing, and then finally she comes around. And of course, that's satisfying for the audience because again, we know he's the guy, right? Like he's Heath Ledger, for crying out loud, or he's Matthew McConaughey. Like, of course he's the guy, right? Look at this, look at him. We know he's the guy, but she doesn't. And so, go with me on this, but does that almost seem to imply that she doesn't really know what she wants? Or that she doesn't know, like everyone else seems to know what's good for her except her, right? Like her internal sense of what she needs and what she doesn't need and who she likes and who she doesn't like, that's not right? Everyone else around her is right. We, the audience, are right. She doesn't know what she wants. She doesn't know that this guy is good for her. But he does. So even in the romantic comedy that is about the female character, and arguably those movies are made for women, for the most part, interestingly, her judgment and her experience is not respected. It's his, right? He's the one who's right. He's the one who knows that they belong together. She's actually wrong. Does that seem weird to you? I kind of feel like if it's her movie, she should be the one that's right about things. I know. I'm a ruiner. I'm sorry. But that's an honest question, right? Not only is her life being portrayed as incomplete, even though a lot of these female characters have a pretty great life at the beginning of the film, yet her perspective is not acknowledged, right? She meets this guy, she's like, I don't think so, right? And yet she's wrong about that. And granted, sometimes we are wrong. First impressions are, notoriously inaccurate. And so it's very possible that people could be wrong, but she's wrong here. And again, I wonder about what effect that has when women are watching rom-coms over and over again, because there's a lot of them and people like to watch them. You've seen yours a couple of times, right? Yeah, of course you have. So you watch them over and over again, but what's kind of the effect of absorbing this message of, you know, life is incomplete without a guy, and, you know, she's wrong about her perspective. She doesn't know what she wants. She doesn't know what's good for her. And again, are there movies that are the opposite? Are there movies where the guy's going through his life and he's just great, and his friends are saying, oh, you really need a wife, you really need to get married? The Lake House? Okay. But that's a very recent one, right?
No. That's quite old. I think it's not 1990, 2005.
Oh, I was thinking of something else. Who's in the Lake House?
I don't know the title. There's about this lake house, like one's in the future and one's in the past, and the community is two letters. Like the mailbox is like what connects them.
Oh, okay. So there's some sort of like fantastic element to it, if you will, like the time traveler's wife or something.
Yeah.
Right. Okay. All right. So that might be a little different. That sounds interesting, though. But not your average romantic comedy. But yeah, that you don't see the opposite, right? You don't see romantic comedies with guys being convinced that they need to, you know, that they need to sort of have this woman in their life for their life to be complete. And then they meet the girl and they're like, I don't know, right? And then she pursues him for the whole movie, and then finally he's like, oh yes, you're the one. I've never seen that movie either, right? And again, I'm not saying that it should be made. It probably wouldn't be a very good movie. But it's interesting to ask, why has that movie not been made? And why is this movie made over and over and over again with different actors and different details, right? What is it that people like about it? What is it that resonates with people? And again, what messages are being transmitted? Because people are watching, sorry, Nasra, but people are watching the same movie over and over again in terms of plot points, right? They're watching the same story over and over again. So what are they learning from it? And again, I'm not trying to ruin these movies because they're fun to watch. My girlfriend and I watched a few like Christmas romantic movies, which are even worse than these. But you know, they're just fun to watch, right? They are fun to watch. But yeah, all of these are kind of fairy tales in that they're all about the Prince Charming, right? They're all about the woman, you know, going through her life, meeting Prince Charming, and that kind of brings her to this newer level of life or existence that she didn't know she could have, right? She's almost in a coma in a way until Prince Charming comes and kisses her and wakes her up, right? And now she's gonna live this more full kind of life, right? And this is a very interesting image, is it not? I'm so sorry. I'm so sorry. I know. I am so sorry. Yeah, it is true love's kiss, but she is literally in a coma, right? She's literally in a coma here. She is totally unconscious, and he is the one who wakes her up, right? This is not a consensual kiss, though, right? Is she allowing him to kiss her? No, she's unconscious, right? And you know, this is okay because again, the audience, we know that he's the guy, right? And look how freaking handsome he is. He's even wearing a cape and crushing it, right? So this is a good-looking guy. He's a prince. We know he's really nice. So it's like, oh yes, kiss her and it'll be happily ever after. But what if he wasn't a prince? What if he was some like gross old dude? Good. Maybe he's just a normal guy, right? Or maybe he didn't brush his teeth in the morning. Who knows? But she doesn't get any choice in this. And then he's going to wake her up? Right? Is this story really about her? Yes, but also no. Right? Like she's... I don't know. I find this a little bit complicated when you kind of look at it from a different angle, right? Where he's waking her up. She's going to fall in love with him, right? They already met. Just once. Okay. Yeah. Yeah. Just because you met someone once doesn't make this legitimate. I am so sorry to do this, but no. It's different when it's true love, but how do we know it's true love?
Love, come on.
Because it wasn't true love, she wouldn't have broken up. The spell said.
Ah, true love's kiss. Yeah, but can they love each other after just meeting once? I don't know. And again, like she seems to have no choice in this. It's a spell, right? Do they love each other? Do we know that? I assume he has quested to find her. I assume this isn't just a...
He loves her. He wouldn't go. And he knew they were supposed to meet him, but she didn't come. And she was like, oh, I feel bad. I don't want to go there.
So she bailed on the date, and then she ghosted him. And is that what's happening here? Am I reading this story right?
Yeah.
She ghosted him,
Yeah.
and then he's going to show up and kiss her anyway.
That's because she was poisoned by the evil witch.
Okay. Okay, she was poisoned by an evil witch.
How many more you want?
I don't know. I'm just asking you to think about this in a little bit of a different way. Many of these movies, you know, if you look at them from kind of a sociological perspective, you can see that they reinforce the idea that women are incomplete without a man, or without being married, or without having kids, right? There's this domestic element to their life that they are being taught that, you know, the only way they can have a fulfilling life is through this path, by finding the guy. And I'm not necessarily saying that that is wrong, but I am questioning the idea of why you don't see the opposite thing portrayed for guys. Right? You don't see guy rom-coms, and I'm not sure that I have an answer for why you don't, but sometimes it's good to ask the question and think about it. Right? This is the last thing I'll talk about before I give you a break. The Bechtel Test. Have you ever heard of this? You have? Bechtel Test came out of a comic strip in the 80s, and it was about lesbian characters. Interestingly enough, and in this comic strip, the two characters were talking, and they were going to go to see a movie. And one character said, "Yeah, in choosing a movie, I only watch movies that have at least two women characters in it. They have to talk to each other, and they have to talk about something other than men." And so it was a joke. It was a cartoon, right, in a newspaper. But it actually kind of caught on. And so people started to actually score movies based on, do they pass these three criteria? So you have to have two women characters, and they've kind of elaborated this to, the characters have to actually have names, okay? So they have to be characters with names, real characters, not background characters, real characters with names. Two women, they have to talk to each other in the movie, and they have to talk about something other than the guy, than the male character. Do you want to take a guess at how many movies actually pass this test? These three criteria? 300? What? Movies? Percentage-wise. 20% pass? Less than 1%? You guys are low estimators.
50.
15%. It feels like, if you just think about this though, it feels like like most movies should pass this test, right? It feels like it's not a hard test to pass, but you are correct in that, yeah, a lot of characters do, or a lot of films do not pass the test. So if you're really interested in this, there's actually a website where they score these things. And I should update my stat here, but as of 2015, 58% of films passed all three. 10% failed one, 20% failed two, and 10% failed all three. So, but that's pretty shocking, isn't it? Almost half of movies out there don't have two women characters that talk to each other about something other than men, right? And let's face it, there's lots of things to talk about other than men, unfortunately, right? I just found this out. I thought women were talking about us all the time, but it turns out, guys, that's not the case. Apparently, you women have other things to talk about. I can't imagine what, but but apparently this is the way it is. Yeah. So Mark Harris in Entertainment Weekly a few years ago. This is the 2009 Academy Awards. If you had to pass the test to be nominated for an Oscar, half of the films couldn't have been nominated for Oscars. Those are like the best films of the year, right? The Oscars are the best films of the year, and half of them don't even have two women characters who talk to each other about something other than men, right? And here, in 2013, still half the films are not passing the test, not making the cut. And this writer here, Charles Stross, said that half of the films that do pass only pass because women are talking about marriage or babies. So they're not necessarily talking about the guy, but they're talking about that kind of stuff, right? So they kind of just make it through the test. But I don't know, that's kind of cheating. So, but that's kind of shocking, isn't it? Because women make up 50% of the population. And I assume, I'm told, it seems bizarre to me, but I'm told that women have other things to talk about and other things they are interested in than men, right? Apparently that is the case, and yet our films do not demonstrate that at all, right? They demonstrate the fact that stories are about men and for men, and men have lots of different things to talk about and adventures to go on, but women are supporting characters in that story, and really all they're interested in talking about is the guy and marriage and babies, right? So it's kind of interesting and kind of, from my perspective, a little sad and limiting. It's the same message as the toys, right? The toys were, the girls' toys were telling us a certain message about what girls could be and should be and could want and should want. And here in many of the movies that we see, we're seeing the exact same message, just in a much more sophisticated package, right? And so, we gave little girls a little baby, a doll baby with a bath so they could learn how to take care of babies. And here we are giving them the same message when they're 15 and 20 and 30 and 40 years old. The same message that's all they should be concerned about. And again, I'm not saying there's anything wrong with being concerned about that, but there's more to women's lives than just the guy and marriage and babies. There's more to that experience, but women often don't see it represented the same way as men do. Right? Okay, let's take a little break. That went a little longer than I thought, but that's okay. Come back and I think we'll talk about misogyny. Okay, and we are back. So, what I've been kind of trying to convince you of here is the idea that movies have implicit messages in them. They have social messages that are below the surface that we kind of absorb and learn, regardless of whether we're meaning to or not, and regardless really of whether the movie is trying to transmit those messages. Because again, the movie exists in, you know, a set of cultural norms and values and beliefs, and most movies contain some element of those cultural norms as well, right? So the movie or the television show that we're watching is in the process of teaching us cultural norms and cultural values, even if that's not entirely what it's trying to do, right? It's trying to entertain us or, you know, help us experience these emotions or tell us this story, but it's also teaching us social beliefs and values. That kind of brings me to talking about misogyny. Whoops, I think I jumped one too far. Yep, I did. Talking about misogyny. And so misogyny is a dislike or contempt for or a prejudice towards women, okay? And so we can see misogyny sort of evidenced or in evidence in a number of ways, sometimes through the exclusion of women, either from organizations or positions of power, or simply from teams at work or whatever, sometimes through hostility, right? So we can see this on social media, through androcentrism. Andro is, I believe, Latin for man, and centrism is centrism. So being male-centric. Elements of the patriarchy. We haven't talked about patriarchy yet, but we will probably tomorrow. Male privilege, right? The idea that men have power and opportunity that women don't. We can see misogyny through belittling women or disenfranchising them, so taking away power from them. Violence against women is an element of misogyny, and we see that in all societies around the world to a greater or a lesser degree. Sexual objectification is also part of misogyny, and so all of these elements of misogyny are based on a hatred or a distrust or some kind of angry feeling towards women. And again, some of these feelings go back in our culture quite some time. Some of them are found in religious texts as well. And so it's a very pervasive form of sexism, okay? And sadly, we can very easily find misogyny in media, particularly social media, okay? So there's lots of hatred against or negative comments made towards or about women on social media. You don't have to go very far to find it. And interestingly, about 50% of these misogynistic tweets on Twitter actually come from women themselves, which is very interesting, is it not? You wouldn't think so, right? You would think that all negative posts and misogynistic posts toward women came from men, but in fact that's not entirely the case. And again, that shows us that all of society absorbs the social messages, right? And then we act them out differently. Right, so I've been sort of drumming this in, the idea that we absorb these social messages from media kind of without realizing it, but they can be damaging, they can be dangerous. And so I'd like to look at this as an example, okay? Anybody watch this show? No? Okay. So this show is an American television show. It's a sitcom. It's a situation comedy. So it's like a half-hour program, and you know, it's primarily a comedy show. It's for laughs. And so it centers around these four guys here. from left to right, that's Howard, and then Leonard, and then Sheldon, and then Raj over on the end. And the women here are people who are involved with them from left to right. That's Bernadette, and then Penny, and then Amy on the far left. And so the show kind of centers around the four guys with the women as kind of slightly more supporting characters. All of them are physicists, and so they are kind of stereotypical nerds or geeks, if you will. But they're all adults as well. So they're all physicists and they work at a university, I think. Okay, that's the setting or the plot. And so what I want to do is I want to watch this video essay. Okay, and in the video essay, I want you to watch it and pay attention to a couple things. Number one, what social messages are being transmitted about women and about men? Okay, because we'll see that, and the video essayist will point those things out to us. And secondly, what is being laughed at and why? Okay, so where is the humor actually coming from? Okay, cool. Okay, now online, yeah, okay. So online people, the video link is in Microsoft Teams. Yeah, the link is in Microsoft Teams, so I'll turn you online people loose to watch the video. Try to pay attention to those questions, and then when you come back, we probably won't have time to talk about them, but we'll see where we are, okay? So go watch the video, and we'll see you in just a little bit, online people. We'll do the same here in class. Online people, we've got a few more minutes in the video, but that's okay. We'll pick it up tomorrow and then we'll talk about what we've seen, okay? So have a good afternoon and I'll see you tomorrow.